Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to this new series of Ask Me Anything when it comes to TikTok. To be honest, it's not only meant to be for TikTok. We're going to be doing also about Amazon, about Walmart, about e commerce in general. But I just wanted to really kick off this new series, especially because I've been seeing lately the space has been changing quite fast, especially with things that have to do with Amazon and TikTok. So I just wanted to create this space beyond, all the podcasts, all the webinars that we do, just to really give a space for all the people that, follow us in all the social media channels and LinkedIn, clients as well, trying to give you the latest in terms of what I'm seeing when it comes to Amazon. And hopefully just tell you firsthand what I'm seeing. At Ecomcy, we manage, a lot of brands when it comes to Amazon, Walmart, and TikTok. So if something happens, we are the first one to hear it because, we need to make sure that we're taking care of all the things that are happening on an ongoing basis, especially because with, the responsibility that we have, we need to always make sure that we keep our trainings and knowledge in terms of everything around advertising compliance, all the different kind of things associated with these marketplaces, and hopefully a lot of those things that we go through on a daily basis can be the knowledge source of answering some of the questions that we're going to be doing live. So the goal of this is very simple, guys. So what we're going to be doing is usually I bring a lot of questions that we get on a daily basis, from clients within our Slack, within our close communities, just to try to share them on screen. The goal is also to, in real time, you're having an issue right now when it comes to TikTok specifically, which is the topic of today, or anything to do with Amazon. Feel free to drop them down in the comments below. Hopefully, I should see it popping up. Sometimes it doesn't, but if I don't see it here, I will then make sure to check all the respective channels and reply directly to you. But yeah, we can kick off with essentially the session. So I already have prepared quite a few questions that I get from TikTok on an ongoing basis. So I'm gonna start bringing some of those to the screen so we can kick off the live. And then of course, as we proceed with the live stream, feel free to join us, ask any questions. And as I already mentioned, the goal is to not only make it a TikTok focus, like if there's something beyond TikTok you want us to kind of cover, more than happy to add value there. Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna start bringing some of the first questions that I have here on the screen. So I just want to make sure that we can start going one by one. So I mean, the first one, to be honest with you guys, the first one I get all the time is kind of some of the basics, right? Like is the the beginning of TikTok, right? Like I get this all the time. So especially when it comes to Amazon sellers, I get like, how do I actually get started selling on TikTok? Is this actually the right platform for me? Does it make sense? Doesn't it make sense? I mean, the reality is that TikTok, I say this to everybody that asks me when it comes to TikTok, is not meant for everybody. Of course, it's a super, super powerful platform, and you should definitely consider it if you're thinking into, ways to diversify your sources of revenue and traffic. But you have to be very methodical to reverse engineer if this is really the place for you to be. So, being said that, to answer like how to get started, so I'm gonna focus specifically in United States, right? United States is kind of very tricky when it comes to opening an account because the issue when it comes to TikTok is that you have to have essentially either yourself have to be living in the USA or have to have somebody that lives in the USA, and then the company as well has to be raised in the United States. Now, this works around that. I don't necessarily recommend them because the issue is when you start actually finding works around that in terms of using a representation or somebody that can manage the company on your behalf. You never know what can happen down the line, and this could potentially be an issue, right? So I would say if you right now you're not at that stage that you're living in the USA, you have a company incorporated in the United States, I would recommend you that you start focusing still in our marketplace such as Walmart, for example, or keep scaling on Amazon. But that's my advice when it comes to that. In terms of the sign-ups, it's pretty straightforward. In terms of opening the account, like once you have the company and personal information, it's just that you have to have those kind of requirements that are pretty much having either a green card or living in the USA. And in this case, also the company, right, in the USA. Okay. Awesome. So the other thing we have here, I get this quite a lot, is regarding following. Very, very, very hard question in the sense I get this asked a lot. Like, in Instagram, Facebook, and all of that. If you don't have a big following, if you don't have essentially a consistent following, it can be very difficult to make a living in terms of selling on this platform. The good thing is when it comes to TikTok, you don't necessarily need all the time like a big following. In fact, a lot of the brands that we actually been very successful when it comes to TikTok, we don't necessarily have a huge following. We just have the right strategy in terms of finding the right influencers that have the right audiences when it comes to showcasing their content. And on top of that, we make sure we reward them consistently when it comes to commission and all of that. So no, you don't need a big following when it comes to TikTok. The only thing is that you need to make sure first of all you have the budget. I would say that's actually more important than following. I think a lot of times people when they start on TikTok, they assume that it's as simple as creating your storefront. And when it comes to your TikTok shop, they put the catalog up there, and then from there, essentially, sales are gonna start coming. The reality is not anything like that. You need to have a lot of investment initially on creators. So this means reaching out to other creators where you send your samples, and essentially these influencers that they're going to start creating content on your behalf. The thing is, for this to be impactful enough, you have to do it in volume, and that's why a lot of people really struggle when it comes to TikTok, because compared to something such as Amazon, the reality is that when you do TikTok, at the beginning, you're not going to see a lot of revenue. The main focus has to be to really start getting that initial engagement, those initial KPIs in terms of people commenting, liking, potentially following. But if your main driver to define success, at least when it comes to TikTok, is sales, you're gonna be disappointed pretty fast. Like the real way for you to actually define success when it comes to TikTok is actually seeing how this is impacting everything I'm doing outside of TikTok. For example, we have a methodology for us to track when we start doing traffic within TikTok, how this actually support us when it comes to things outside of TikTok. So, for example, for Amazon brands, we have a lot of brands that when this is done correctly, we're actually seeing a very successful snowball effect in terms of essentially branded search terms, and those branded search terms potentially transforming into sales and then driving organic ranking. And we have a lot of case studies that when TikTok is done consistently and with the right avatar, in terms of the creators, they can drive very insightful traffic that can be very impactful for your business. So yeah, I would say following is not very important, but you need to ensure you have the right budget, and more importantly, you find the right creators. Okay, awesome. So I have another question here. So essentially, it's regarding pricing. So it's saying like, should I go cheaper or not compared to Amazon? This is something like almost daily we get across all the brands that we manage at Ecomcy. Like our clients ask us, should we actually go and have a lower price compared to Amazon? How do we keep consistency? And the reality is, from the advice I can give you, even myself from selling on TikTok, is on TikTok, you have to be aggressive for you to be essentially relevant and gain consistent engagement. What I mean by that is you need to have an offer that is irresistible. At the end of the day, TikTok, you're trying to break the pattern. Imagine somebody scrolling on the app, they're looking at funny videos, X, Y, and Z that might be watching in TikTok, and then when it comes to this, you don't have something that breaks the pattern. You're gonna have a very tough journey. Breaking the pattern is not only down to the pricing, it's also down to the content or having elements on those initial 1 to 3 seconds that are very interruptive. But pricing has to be a good kind of driver. Now, something I do with some of our brands is that we actually design products that only meant for TikTok. Now, why this is actually very important and actually very smart to do, because when you have a product that's only meant for TikTok, I'm going to give you a very simple example. We manage a very big makeup brand on Amazon, and of course they have a very diverse kind of SKUs. They have the lipsticks, they have the thing for different creams, for the eyelashes, X, Y, and Z. What we did is we created a small sample product that essentially is unique to TikTok. Their entry price is very cheap. Of course, the quantities and everything associated with this is much, much smaller. But what allows you to do essentially, and the reason why this is very powerful, is because now people enter into your ecosystem in with a low barrier. They get to try all your different SKUs, and more importantly, we make sure on that packaging in that unique SKU for TikTok that essentially there's a consistent follow-up and strategy to make sure that we engage with them, to let them know that we have more products, and they can actually find us on platforms such as Amazon or direct to consumer. Now, that's how we use TikTok as essentially a traffic magnet, and that should be always the goal. You need to use TikTok as a traffic magnet, because the last thing you want to encounter yourself is just having essentially the same pricing that you have on Amazon on TikTok, and then you're gonna have a very tough journey. Not only you're gonna cannibalize each other efforts, but most likely you're not gonna really achieve the goal of TikTok, which is new to brand, new impressions, new consumers that they wouldn't find you otherwise, because you're giving them an irresistible offer. So to answer that question, so I can jump into the next one, yes, I would recommend always, all the time, like if you can have a unique kind of offer that you can make it a very attractive for TikTok, that you go for that when it comes to restructuring your team. Okay, awesome. So now let's go into next one. Okay. um so this is actually very similar, like, because a lot of people ask me, like, is TikTok meant for only high ticket products or only impulsive buys? I'm gonna be honest, the brands that are the most successful in terms of TikTok are usually anywhere between $20 to $30 max. 10 to $30 actually. Anything after that, it becomes a tougher journey. Now, to for you to combat that, you can do what I just explained. You can have SQ that's an entry level, and it's kind of, really allowing people to discover your brand and then become aware of the actual product. Like the example that you guys, I'm sure you're seeing everywhere in social media. Why do you think IP, the watches, did a partnership with Swatch? Because they know for a fact that that 300 $400 awareness deal, most likely they're not making significant amount of money compared to the real watches, but it's an awareness game. They have these appetizers for them to them figure out what is the actual deal, which is the real AP, right? The same we're gonna do with TikTok, right? If you have premium products, try to find an entry level product that can be more impactful when it comes to that. Okay. Next one, let's see what we got in here. Can I use TikTok shop data to improve my Amazon listing and I tried it? Yes. So this is actually very good that you mentioned, because what we find, I mean, now with Amazon, by the way, before I go into this, Amazon is having a significant change. I don't know if you guys are seeing lately, but everything happening when it comes to Rufus is being very, very impactful. I'm actually having a lot of meetings today with the team. I've been talking directly with people within Amazon itself, and the game is completely changing when it comes to Rufus. Now Alexa is becoming more like your personalized shopper based on your historical data, and the reason is because they realized that Rufus wasn't having a high adaptation as some people thought, right? um so now, why this is important to what I'm going to explain next. Once you start engaging with consumers within TikTok shop, you're going to start getting a lot of data. Data usually in the shape of engagement. I can tell you how many times we actually figure out things about product that we only found out thanks to TikTok. Why? Because somebody comments something about product, about the quality or about the usage, or they start making content. Like there was actually this a client, he sell a product, specific product for the kitchen. Now, to not say specific the product to avoid giving away the product, he's selling this product that it was meant to be used for one specific fruit, and then somebody in TikTok start making content. They figure out that this actual a product could actually also be used for other type of ingredients while cooking. And when we saw that, and actually consistently on TikTok, we went to Amazon. We actually re-engineered our listing, some of the copy and images to reflect the usage that was going viral on TikTok. And we had a significant, I think it was around 15%, 10 to 15% increase in revenue just by an insight like that. So that's why TikTok, I always say, can be a very nice source of traffic, because what TikTok does is allows you to tap into communities, into audiences that you wouldn't tap otherwise with traditional Amazon, right? Or even D2C. So it's definitely a place to be. again, it just being careful and mindful about what the expectation should be, to make sure that you don't get burned by essentially promises of thinking that, you're gonna reach the moon, which again, I'm not saying you won't, because there's again a lot of opportunity when it comes to that, but we have to be realistic about what is actually possible in the long term with everything, right? So that's another very important one. Now, another thing as well I want to bring to the table is another very important data you're going to get from TikTok, and this happens a lot as well, is how your different kind of price points could potentially drive a certain behavior around your product. So for example, we have sometimes figured out with TikTok new price points that we didn't actually had enough engagement on Amazon to make a decision. So we knew sometimes with certain products that certain price points were more aggressive and consistent in terms of driving results and outcomes. So again, that's another thing I want to mention. Like, it's all a matter of split testing, but yes, you're gonna get a lot of data. But at the end of the day, you have to be proactive, right? You need to make sure that you reuse that data, use it for examples like the one I just explained. Okay, cool. So let's see what also we have in here. Let's have a look. So this is actually a good one, because a lot of times people, when they think about TikTok, the first thing that comes to mind, and we know this, the first thing that comes to mind to TikTok, I actually don't want to be the person behind doing, or the content. A lot of people is camera shy, they don't want to be the actual person that has to be there in front of the camera, having to do everything in terms of showcasing the product here and there. So something that I would advise everybody to do is, first of all, think what is going to be your strategy in the long term, because the reality is, if you want to be the face of your TikTok, the strategy is going to be completely different than somebody that's going to repurpose influencer marketing. Now, to be totally honest with you as well, which is, this is another important thing. The way for you to scale TikTok the fastest and the best, from what I see, is actually when you build a TikTok with other kind of influences. Why? Because if everything's relying on yourself, and we know this for a fact, like a lot of us are busy, we have other things going on. Most people won't have the patience to really focus on doing consistently this piece of content live. Therefore, it's better that you find either somebody like an ambassador or somebody that you can trust, that essentially they can go live on your behalf. You can also mix it. By the way, we have brands that they do like a mix approach. A mix approach will look something like, you have influencers that they go live. They either go live or they do content on your behalf, and then you, as the founder, sometimes you can pop in. Which, by the way, that also works very well, because what you're doing there is you're maintaining the authenticity. That, okay, I have people that definitely do content for me, but that doesn't mean that I'm out of the picture. Sometimes people really want to see a real human behind the business, and they're being engaged with somebody beyond influencer that are just trying to pitch whatever they're doing. So that's another recommendation I can give you. But no, you don't necessarily need to be the person behind. It's not a must for you to have a successful kind of journey in terms of your TikTok. Okay, so just want to make it that clear. Cool. So let's see what other kind of questions we have. So now okay, so this one is very interesting as well, because on TikTok you have different type of advertisement that you can do. Okay, so you have the traditional type of advertisement that you can do within the platform, where you can reach different audiences, and to some extent TikTok help you get outreach. And then you have something called Spark Ads. The main difference, to make it very, very simple for you to understand, is essentially that when you do effectively Spark Ads, you just amplifying the success of a piece of content that somebody else is doing, right? So for example, let's say you go out there and work with an influencer, and this influencer essentially, it does a lot of engagement, a lot of likes, a lot of comments. What end up happening is that then this piece of content essentially would get amplified. It will get amplified to the point of, you push it to more audiences, to bigger traffic. And the reason why this can be also very impactful is because you actually first don't need to invest a lot of money upfront, because you only do giving a commission based on sales and the sample to the influencer. If it becomes successful, then you double down on whatever is working. Now with traditional ads, it's not like that. You essentially just do traditional ads on any piece of content that you upload. So that's essentially, in plain English, the main difference between one and the other. Okay. Now let's see which other question. Hmm. Yeah, so this is a question the team was saying that they get a lot that actual answer. So essentially, how you go about finding creators. There is a couple of ways of doing this. Okay, the first one is through software, which, to be honest, I think most of you should do that through software such as Eureka. Very good software. It helps you find the right people based on your category, whatever you have in mind. It just really filter down things to essentially the last step for you to just approve. And the good things, you can handle everything there, such as communication, samples, and all of that. The other thing, you can also do it yourself. It just, do you have the time and do you have the team in house that can do that for you? Because that require a lot of back and forth, sending the communication, getting approval, say if they want to proceed, if they want to proceed. So that's a very important thing you have to be mindful of. But essentially, to keep a long story short, I would say for most of you out there, I would recommend you use a software such as Ueka. It's very, very good software. I mean, reach out to them. There's my close friend there, Jordan, in the team. They do a very good job when it comes to figure out how to find the creators. And the way it works is commission based, guys. That's why I love TikTok, because the only expense at the end of the day you're gonna have upfront is mainly the expense that you're gonna get out of the sample itself, because you're giving a commission only based on sales. Now, of course, some influencers, especially the big ones, they wanna fix a cost on top of the commission. So we have some influencers that we might say, okay, we're gonna give you $200 or $500 or 1,000, depends on the size and the reach, plus a commission. Now, my recommendation is that you focus 80% of your fleet on only commission based, and you select at least 20% of your budget for paid ones. Why? Because the paid ones are going to give you that snowball effect to get sometimes richer and faster traffic than the ones that are smaller than doing it only on commission. And the commission at the same time, you try to go for those home runs. It's similar than PPC. On PPC, you have exact match campaigns that focus on keywords that you're certain that they're going to work, and then you have autumn broad that you're testing. Kind of the same philosophy here. It just from the perspective of creators. Okay, cool, cool. Let's see which other question we got here. So how much budget should I start with for TikTok ads if I'm a small brand? Okay, so this one is a tricky one. The reason why it's a tricky one is because the budget is heavily conditioned on something that is down to your product. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. If your product, for example, is $10, the budget is completely different that the product is $50. Why? Because your main expense when doing TikTok, remember, ads come down the line when you're trying to amplify success. What really is going to be your biggest expense at the beginning is content, right? So it's essentially trying to figure out how much, how many samples I'm going to give away, how consistently I'm going to do it, and more importantly, which out of those samples I'm going to then run, as I already explained, Spark ads. Now, going back to the budget question, if you're a small brand, I say a bare minimum. And if you cannot afford what I'm going to say next, I would say stay on Amazon for now. But as a bare minimum, if you want TikTok to work, you should allocate at least the bare minimum 50 samples per week. We're talking that around 200 units per month should be allocated to scale TikTok. Why? Because out of those 200 people using a sample, maybe 50 to 80 are going to actually do content that could be usable. And out of those 80 people, maybe only 20 to 30 are actually going to start bringing you traffic. It's a numbers game, right? Not all of them are going to reply, unfortunately. Not all of them are going to do a content that is feasible for what you want to achieve. And more importantly, not all of them are going to drive the traffic that you need. So therefore, the best thing that you can do and this is again the best advice, is try to focus as much as possible to volume in terms of samples. Now, if the number already mentioned sounds very aggressive, too much, or you think it cannot be aligned with what potentially is the launch phase that you have in mind, then my best advice, try to focus first on Amazon, build that consistency again before then scaling forward when it comes to TikTok. Okay, awesome. So let's go into next one. Okay, so how does TikTok shop compare to selling on Amazon or Shopify? Okay, so very important thing here. When it comes to selling on TikTok, it's not one or the other. That's the other very important thing. A lot of time people say, okay, should I go TikTok? Should I go with Shopify? No, at the end of the day, I'm a huge believer. I've always been a huge believer omni-channel. Omni-channel means not only selling on one platform, means selling on multiple platforms. Myself specifically, I even believe in global expansion. I push a lot of brands from US to Europe, from Europe to USA, to Middle East, to Asia. I have brands in Mexico, in Brazil. So I'm very aggressive with global, because I think the reality is that most people, what they try to go very aggressive with, in this case, USA, um, the reality is, as you try to focus most of the time in the USA, then you have other people that actually scaling into other marketplaces, right? That potentially have less competition, they have less people kind of going for it, and then it's a no-brainer. You could be making more money when it comes to that. So, as an advice, is try to focus as much as possible on your market, of course, initially, but then the other thing is you also want to make sure that secondary markets you can leverage them if possible, because I usually say that secondary markets is is a second life to whatever you're doing. It gives you that opportunity to really make the most out of your home country and find uh, different ways to scale. So let's see which other questions we have in here. So I just want to make sure here. Okay, so another question we have in here is what type of products sell right now when it comes to TikTok. So let me confirm this to you as well right now. So when it comes to TikTok, the reality is that there's gonna be different type of categories right now that actually being very successful. Okay, and I'm gonna explain which one are those. So I'm sorry, I'm actually checking some of the questions here as they're coming in. So I just wanted to make sure I put them in line. So when it comes to the different categories, essentially the ones that are going to be the most successful are the ones that I call being the best for social commerce. Social commerce is essentially what you're trying to do with TikTok. Now, when it comes to what means being social commerce friendly, the best ones that you're going to find are usually the ones that are very fun to show on camera. So for example, let's say I'm selling this cup. It's very boring to do content with that, right? Because essentially what are you going to show, like how you put water on it, or how is it the color or things like that. Like it needs to be something that's actually consistent, right, in terms of making fun unboxing videos and things like that. So as a thing that I would recommend as well, is my best advice when it comes to products. It has to be things that can be easily be shown on camera. As I said, like on unboxing video, I have this product, the camera, I show how it works, these AirPods, you get the idea. If you do that, I can guarantee you're going to have a very successful journey when it comes to actually making sure you can make the most out of essentially getting the exposure that you want on TikTok. If your product is boring, and when I say boring, I don't mean in the bad way. It means that it's not friendly when it comes to social commerce. Again, it's going to be tough for you to really maximize the outcome. So that's essentially the main thing you need to take home in terms of that. I think to start bringing everything home in terms of start concluding everything, because we are already in the mark of 30 days. So just to give you some ideas, these live streams that I have in mind are going to be around 30 minutes every week. every week or 2 weeks. So my goal is try to bring as many questions as I get from here, from my phone, the team, and everything, bring them into the live stream and trying to answer them in live. So if there is any other questions that maybe I didn't answer, leave them in the link in the comments below. Then I will make sure to answer in depth for you. But to start concluding is you need to, as a takeaway for today, is you need to make sure the product is right fit for TikTok. And by making sure, it means it has to be social commerce friendly, it has to be nice to show on camera, good unboxings, how to, before and after, things like that. The price point has to be competitive enough. You don't want to actually penalize yourself behind a product that's too expensive, and you can actually do discounts. If that's the case, try to find a secondary SKU, secondary product that's only TikTok friendly, and that you can upsell then that to bring into your brand and upsell other products. The third element is understanding how creators work, is commission focus, and based on the one successful, you can amplify with ads. And then the final thing as well is the importance. Like I said, TikTok, the way you define success, I guess, is based on awareness. So if you want my advice and to get the most out of this, is try use TikTok as an amplifier uh, tool, not only as a tool to generate sales. Because if you do that and then you understand how to track the brand exercise and the awareness exercise beyond TikTok, you are going to be very surprised how, if done correctly, it can help you significantly scaling your sales on Amazon and beyond. So that's it. That's pretty much everything from me. I know this is just a tiny bit of everything that's TikTok related, but I just try to cover some of the main questions to give you a very good taste of what is possible and what you can do. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, founder and CEO of Ecomcy, where we specialize on doing everything related to Amazon, Walmart, and TikTok as a full service agency. So feel free to go to our website, book a call with the team or myself. We jump on a call, try to discuss this in more depth, and hopefully explore if TikTok is the right platform for you. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for joining me live, and see you on the next one. Bye bye. Thank you guys.